We start. So in this session, in this next hour, we're going to take you through two more chapters, and we will do some activities related to these two chapters. So the first one, I've forgotten what our chapter number is. Even was it number 17? I think so.
17.
So this is a chapter that I have co-written with Michael, and Michael will take you through this activity and tell you a little bit about the chapter. Are you all right to
Yes.
go for it?
Checking my is my microphone on? I was just aware that in that first hour we were throwing a lot of terminology at you. We were throwing like human-centered design and service design and design thinking. And I just thought before we get into it, I'd just take 2 minutes, maybe just to unpack what that means. So there's no one model of doing a service design or a design thinking project. But this is one of the most famous ones. It's the Stanford model of design thinking. So I'll just take 2 minutes to kind of talk you through it, just perhaps to demystify some of the language that we've been using. On this model, there are 5 phases that you would undertake as part of a project. And the first is probably the most important, which is to empathize, to really try to understand the users of your service. And it uses a range of different user experience research techniques. So ones that we're all quite familiar with, like focus groups or interviews, but you can also do service safaris, where you act as though you are your own client, you are a user of your own service, and from the first touch point you walk through, whether that's a physical service or an online service. And you can manifest your research in these things called user personas, which is what we'll focus on here. The second stage is that rather than jump to assuming that you've got a solution to it, is that you spend time in the problem space, as we call it. You spend more time than you normally would in a change project, trying to work out whether you've got the right problem in mind. So it's spending time trying to solve the right problem. There are various methods that we use to think openly and freely in quite a diverse way, to try to gather as many different ideas as possible, because that's the way in which we narrow them down to get really good different ideas. So we use things like brainstorming and brainwriting and clustering and crowdsourcing different ideas. It's important in design thinking to manifest what you're thinking. Far too often we just have these ideas in our head, and user personas do this. But you can use rehearsals or little role plays, as we'll do in the second half of this workshop. You can do a walkthrough of what's it like to be a user of your service from start to end, and you can walk through that in different stages. And then finally, you apply it, you test it, you monitor it, iterate it. So as I say, lots of different ways of doing design projects, but I just thought it'd be helpful to give you an example of what one end-to-end project might involve. I mentioned these ideas of personas. So what are user personas? So they're a fictional rendition of a character created to embody the key characteristics of the anticipated users of a designed output. It's rather sort of a dry technical explanation, but I'll come back to this idea of manifesting. At the start of a design project, you do a lot of work to understand the experience of your users and to really empathize with the real life challenges and their real life experience. So that will involve quant data. You might have data in relation to the demographics of your students or your users, but will likely also involve qualitative data, people's stories, people's interview answers, focus group responses. So personas are a way of integrating and manifesting what you've learned about your users and keeping them visible throughout your decision making, your designing process. So typically they will have a face, they will have a name, they'll have an age, they'll have demographic characteristics, but you'll also try and capture the motivations, their hopes, their fears, their strengths, their weaknesses, and their relationship with your service or with your product. The particular example I'm going to explain, and then I'll pass to Radka, is that At my previous law school, we had a task of redesigning our first year curriculum. And I don't know how many people in the room are academics who've been on program teams, but a typical way of doing that would be that the 4 or 5 people who are the module conveners or the program leader will sit down at the start and they'll say, what do we want to achieve? What do our students need from the first year of our degree? And we might look at some data from staff student liaison or from student surveys. Then we'll all go off separately and we'll all write our bit of the curriculum. And then we'll come back and there might be a little bit of work to do to make it connect. And then we'll bring in 3 or 4 students who will generally be volunteers, who will generally be the highest performing, already the most engaged students, and say, what do you think of this? And those students are already super positive about being at university and being in your department, and they'll go, yeah, it all looks great, thank you very much. Okay. We wanted to do it differently, and particularly because we started to understand the potential of design, we wanted to do it differently. So we started with user research. We drew on our tacit knowledge. We had, between us, we had 100 years experience of teaching in that particular law school, and it's perfectly okay to draw on that. But we supplemented it with as much hard data as we could get in relation to who our students were and where they came from, and what they went on to do. And we did desk research on the sorts of challenges that we wanted to address. So we wanted to address the race awarding gap. We wanted to particularly deal with the issues faced by commuting students and challenges of engagement. So we did all the research on that. But then we did user experience interviews and focus groups, and we got people's stories, and we asked them questions not just about their life as a first year law student, but about their life in general. So it was a much more holistic range of data that we generated from that. For this project, we had about 180 students in our first year. We created 3 personas. These are fictional people. These don't really exist. Okay. We used stock photos, but we gave them a face, a name, a background, an age, an educational background, part-time work, what they wanted from their degree, what their outside interests were, what their social background were. So we wanted to capture and manifest a range of different characteristics and a range of different strengths and different challenges. So we're able to deal with issue of mature students, commuting students, students with special needs, students with family responsibilities, students with very good A-levels like Nazir had, and students who'd come in with a BTEC. So that's what we did. These people became really real to us. We became really emotionally invested. So when we were meeting on a weekly basis as a team to make decisions on the Year 1 curriculum, we printed these off and we put them in the middle of the table physically. And every time we reached some junction, we said, how is this going to work? How is this going to work for Terry? And Nazir commutes in from Bolton. How is this really going to work in for him? And Karen's got 2 kids, and one of them's at school, and she needs to pick them up. How is it going to work for her? Okay, so that's what we did. Hopefully you'll see that that's just kind of part of a larger process. But one way in which we use them, for example, is that we prototyped what the first year of our law degree would look like on a week-by-week basis, and we got people to show what they did, and then we walked our 3 characters week by week through what they would be doing and what they would be learning and when their assessments would fall. And it was a really, an awful lot of work, and it was really hard, but we got much richer insights that I think enabled us to make better decisions that worked better for our students than if we hadn't gone to the trouble of doing all that work.
So another way of generating personas when you are in front of the classroom is that I co-create these with the students. So usually I work with postgraduate students, and this when I was a program director, I used to do this every February. So by that time, the cohort would know each other, and I would get them together and I would say, please make me a typical Masters in Management student. And they would work in groups together, and they would create what they believe they are. and they would tell me about their story, about what their pressures are, what their families are expecting of them, what their career aspirations are. So through these artifacts, we created a much better idea about who is actually in front of me in the classroom. You may think, well, with the postgrads, they didn't really have much time to sort of improve anything because they were in that program. So we created that sort of sense of improvement of the program year on year. So as a program director, I did this every year with every cohort. And in the book, there is a little template as well that I, after this, created. If you are struggling, like what questions to ask the students. For the students, this was cathartic. So not even that, just from this exercise, I found out so much about them, so much about their family pressures, their expectations, their fears, their hopes. And you may think, oh, this is a bit childish, so stuff working with these like Blue Peters type of material in the management school. So yes, this is also that sort of, the work in design sometimes looks like this, and it may alienate senior leadership, senior management. So this is sometimes difficult to sell when you are selling it like this. But through these stuff stories, the students, especially the Asian students, all of a sudden got a voice, and they were able to talk about Ivy. They didn't have to talk about themselves. So they said, oh, Ivy feels this, Ivy is like this. So in a way, they were somehow channeling through an object what they really want to tell me, but they would never tell me that because of the cultural constraints or the stuff, the fears that they come, that they shouldn't challenge the lecturer, they are not supposed to be speaking up. So this was sort of an activity that also followed through what Michael was saying with the journey maps that we developed again for Ivy. What has it been like for Ivy to go through the first semester on the master degree, and then they would tell me Ivy's story about what makes her happy, what makes her frustrated. So this is quite a simple activity that everybody can do, but again, it takes a bit of courage. And I was very nervous to bring stickers in front of management school students, I can tell you that. But, as I said, like for the students, this sort of being together, the sense of belonging and them showing to each other. So this is our cohort, this is who we are. And she's really interested in us telling her our stories. So another method that we took on the program.
Thanks, Raki. Yeah. In the book, this is another user persona generated from Rag's work. But we thought it was really important to show you these other two, because this is obviously beautiful. There's great graphic design skill that's gone into this. But we want to remove as many barriers as possible for you to pick up these tools and use them in a very sort of simple, rough and ready way in your own practice. So for my personas, we just use Word and stock images. For Radka, you can see she used much more colourful things like stickers and things cut out from magazines. Now, this is something that you can pick up and use without having the sort of graphic design experience to create something like that. Just very briefly then, why would you want to use them in any of your projects? They're fantastically powerful in shifting perspective. It's so easy for us to default back to our own experience of a service. If it's a service that we give, it's our contribution to the service. It's the most natural thing in the world to default back to that. Whereas if you have a manifestation of a user of that service in front of you, it's much more likely that you will get the student view or the user view, and that will be incorporated into your decision-making process. It means that you can introduce diversity. So I said in a curriculum review, very often it's only the best and brightest students who will volunteer. You don't really capture the needs and views of the students who you really most need to reach. So by using personas, you can kind of insert those characteristics and those challenges into your personas. And you can also, the diversity data that we get is very often around race and gender, but those aren't the only forms of diversity. By using personas, you can introduce diversity in relation to social background, career aspiration, etc. Thirdly, they act as boundary objects. What does that mean? There was a phrase I think Raki used in the first half going, our undergraduates, our postgraduates. And this is the kind of shorthand that we use in our discussions all the time. And they mask huge differences in how we understand the people who we're talking about. If I say our first year law students and I'm with three colleagues, that phrase will trigger a completely different image and set of experiences in my mind as it does for my 3 colleagues. And unless we unpack that, then it's very likely that we will proceed on this project with very different understandings of who we're serving and the problems that we're trying to solve. So as a shared basis for communication, these are really powerful. And they can also be a powerful external communication tool for showing other people who your users are and what their needs are. There are some potential problems. You can't, we're going to do an exercise now that actually is really, really bad practice, because you can't just make them up. They can't just be an amalgam of all your existing assumptions about your users, but that's what we're going to do as a very quick exercise. I've seen lots of projects where people put a lot of effort into creating user personas and then put them on the shelf and never look at them again. So if you do use them, you've got to keep them really visible and front and center when you go through your decision-making process. And there are some cultural barriers, as Ragga said. They're fantastic and fantastically powerful, but they can look a bit amateurish and wonky when you show them to the people whose permission you need to go. So there's a bit of a translation and cultural translation work that you need to do if you use them as part of the external phase of your project. But what we'd like you to do is we'd like you to draw a persona now. So think about your own service, whether it's a program or a professional service that you're involved with. Just create one persona, but try to get that persona to capture some of the key characteristics of the students or the users of the service. So you need to give them a name, an age, a background, some motivations, some strengths, some challenges, and some humanizing factors, who they are. Okay. So this is, you've got pieces of paper, you've got pens on the desk. This is not an art competition, so we won't be judging how beautiful your portraits are, but draw a face, give them a name, and fill those things in. Okay, I'm really sorry to cut you off in your prime, but time has caught up with us. Can I ask people to lift up their persona so we can all have a look at them? There's some great ones. Brilliant. We've got some cool cartoon style. We've got more lifelike style over here. Let me just ask you. So this is not how you would do it as part of a real project, but hopefully you're starting to see some of the value of this. Even on your teams, just talking about who a typical user is and what their characteristics are can be a valuable thing. And on here, on this one, I think you were talking about the family circumstances of the people who use your service. So it's starting to see users as whole people who've got a whole life. It's not just the point of their life when they are in touch with you or using your service that matters. So from this, I think we'd like you to go away and think about, if you were doing this as part of a challenge that you've got, what additional steps would you take to find out more about your users? And if some of this sticks, how would you think about using it as part of a project? And how do you think it would change how you approach an educational development project or a service design project? Those are just things for you to think about as takeaways, because time has caught up with us and I need to hand over. Oh, question.
One of the things that I was wondering when you were talking about your personas, because you had 3 key ones, thank you.
Yeah.
There's obviously people of lots of different types. How did you narrow it down to those 3 particular people?
Great. Okay. So it's a fantastic question. The diversity on a cohort of 180 students would be vast. Making decisions about what to include and what not to include obviously involves some risks. The approach in service design is very often to design for the extreme. Yeah. If you design for your most challenged or your most needy user, you're likely to come up with a service that also works really, really well for your more mainstream person. So that's it. It's a broad answer, but that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, this year I have a commuting student, just one. He's my extreme, but actually I redesigned the whole timetable to 10 a.m. I mean, this may sound very stupid, but it's changed his life. And I suppose that it changed the life of the whole cohort and mine as well. So we start at 10 a.m. We never start at 9 a.m. So very small things sometimes come with high value, very high value. So he's attended every single class because he wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, good. Thank you for playing along with that. I'll pass you back to Raka.
Thank you so much. So we now have one more chapter to cover. So thank you. I hope you've been inspired. And I think every project, curriculum design, any service, anything that you are thinking about. We have colleagues here from organization development, courses for academics, courses for us. Think about us. Sometimes we just think, what expertise do we have? Let's push it onto people. But we don't understand how people actually absorb this expertise. Yeah, so this was chapter 17, and Michael came up with this amazing title. I think that was so cool. Know thy student, for she is not thee. It's a bit of Shakespearean drama here. We had a lot of debates about the titles, and everybody thought all the titles were boring, so we thought,
Yes.
let's jazz it up here. So I hope you like it.